January 21, 2006, police in Hopkinton, Massachusetts received a call from a worried mother.
Hi, this is Priscilla Matarazzo. I'm calling because my daughter moved to Hopkinton about a week ago.
Yes.
I haven't heard from her in 2 days, and I was up there today. She was expecting me. We can't reach her by cell phone, and it's really unusual for her to do this.
All right. The last time you spoke with her, everything seemed all right? She didn't tell you that she was going away unexpectedly or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
She's the type of girl that calls me whenever she does anything.
Sure. Okay. Well, yep. Okay. What's her name, ma'am?
It's Rachel Entwistle and her husband Neil.
When officers arrived at Rachel's home, they found the garage door already open and the front door unlocked. Inside, it was a shocking scene. Rachel, along with her baby daughter Lillian, murdered in their bedroom, hidden under a pile of blankets, and Rachel's husband Neil Entwistle was nowhere to be found.
The top stories in the East Midlands tonight: a mother and daughter shot dead and an international manhunt underway for the father.
Where is Neil Entwistle now?
This case started back in 1999 at the University of York in northern England. Neil, a Nottingham boy raised by a coal miner father and a mother who worked as a school cook, was studying electronic engineering and business management. Rachel Souza, a small-town girl from Carver, Massachusetts, was there for just a year abroad, studying English literature. The two met through the university rowing team that they were both on. Rachel was the coxswain, which basically meant sitting at the front of the boat, telling all the guys what to do. Neil was one of those rowers. They clicked instantly as they spent hours rowing together, facing each other the whole time. Their connection turned romantic. Before long, they were a well-known couple on campus. Neil would even introduce Rachel as, quote, "the woman I am going to spend my life with." They stayed closer for over a year, but when Rachel had to return to the United States for her final year of college, she never showed any interest in other guys. She was all in on Neil. So, after graduating in 2001, Rachel hopped back across the pond to reunite with Neil. 2 years later, Rachel and Neil got married in Plymouth, Massachusetts. After the wedding, the newlyweds settled into a nice apartment in Worcestershire, England. Rachel started teaching English, while Neil landed a solid job at IBM before moving to Kinetic, a privatized company owned and operated by the British military. In 2005, 2 years into their marriage, the couple welcomed their baby daughter, Lillian Entwistle. Life was looking great for the Entwistle family. Neil even created this website called rachelandneil.org, which he loaded with hundreds of family photos, showing off what looked like the happy life. But as time went on, Rachel started feeling homesick. She missed America, her family, and especially wanted her parents to be a part of the little Lillian's life. So, in the same year Lillian was born, they packed up and moved to the States. They stayed with Rachel's parents in Carver, Massachusetts at first, but after a few months, they found their own place at 6 Cubs Path in Hopkinton. It had everything from high ceilings to a backyard hot tub, and all the makings of a dream home, costing $2,700 monthly. Add in the new furniture they bought and the white BMW SUV that Neil leased for $400 a month, and the money was going out pretty fast. But Neil didn't seem worried at all, which was odd when he was unemployed at the time. Rachel and her parents had no reason to suspect anything. As far as they knew, Neil was working a remote job, making $10,000 a month.
They believed, because he worked for a computer company in England, that when he came to the United States, he would still be working for that company. And I believe he also convinced them that there was an offshore account, that the money went through, and that it was for $10,000 a month over a period of a year. Having heard that from Neil, they believed him. They believed that that was the case, that he did have this income, and therefore they weren't suspicious of anything else.
But the truth was Neil hadn't found a job since moving to America. He was completely unemployed, drowning in debt, in an attempt to keep the family, as well as appearances, afloat. Neil did go to a few job interviews at first, but when the callbacks never came, he gave up looking for legitimate work entirely. Instead, he turned to the internet, desperately searching for ways to get rich quickly. He started selling computer products on eBay, but soon began taking people's money without sending them anything, which led to eBay shutting down his account and opening an investigation. Getting more desperate, Neil then started creating a number of these shitty scam websites, like one of them was called millionmaker.co.uk, which promised people a startup kit that would earn them £2 million a year, all for the low price of just £2,000. Then came deepheartsex.com, a sketchy porn site offering videos of barely legal girls. And then there was bigpenismanual.com, which claimed it could teach men how to grow their dicks by 3 inches. But none of these schemes turned into the goldmine Neil was hoping for, so he started putting everything on credit cards, maxing them out one by one. On January 21st, having lived in the new house for less than 2 weeks, Rachel planned a small get-together. Her parents were coming over, along with Rachel's friend, Joanna, for a casual gathering to show off the house and let everyone spend time with little Lillian. But when Joanna and her sister arrived and rang the doorbell, nobody answered. She called Rachel's cell phone and could hear it ringing inside the house, but still, no one picked it up. Confused and starting to worry, Joanna looked around and saw a note in the mailbox from Rachel's mother, asking her to call. Apparently, no one had heard from Rachel since Friday, and now it was Sunday. Something was definitely wrong. Joanna immediately called Rachel's mother, and together they decided to contact the police for a wellness check.
Hi, this is Priscilla Matarazzo. I'm calling because my daughter moved to Hopkinton about a week ago.
Yes.
I haven't heard from her in 2 days, and I was up there today. She was expecting me. There was nobody there, and I just heard from her girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
She was expecting for supper tonight, and there's no one there. We can't reach her by cell phone, and it's really unusual for her to do this.
Yep, okay. We'll send somebody up, we'll check it, and then I'll give you a call back and let you know how we make out.
All right, thank
Okay,
you.
you're entirely welcome. Bye.
When officers arrived at the house, they found the front door unlocked. They stepped inside, calling out as they entered. The house was dark, except for a single light left on upstairs. They moved cautiously from room to room, looking for any sign of the family or anything suspicious. There were plates set out, ready for dinner. The baby sounding machine was still playing, but no Neil, no Rachel, no baby Lillian, and the white BMW was missing from the garage. It was as if the family had left in a hurry, or maybe even in a panic, abandoning everything mid-activity. Yet nothing looked obviously wrong. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle. The house wasn't ransacked. Nothing was broken or stolen. The only detail that stood out was this unmade bed in the master bedroom. There was a pile of bedding on top. Blankets, sheets, everything heaped together. Maybe they were just changing the sheets and had to leave suddenly. With nothing suspicious to go on, the officers left. The next day, Rachel's family kept searching for her. Joanna and her sister were so worried that they spent the night camped out in the Entwistle driveway, waiting for Rachel and Neil to come home. But with still no word from the young family, Rachel's mother and stepfather decided to officially report them missing. That same day, police went back to the house for another check. But this time, as they wandered through the house, they noticed a foul odor that hadn't been there the day before. They followed the smell up to the master bedroom. This time, he took a longer look, and he saw a woman's watch on the floor. The officer then lifted one of the many duvets on the four-poster bed, and that's when he saw a foot sticking out, something they had missed the first time around. Underneath the blankets were the bodies of the 27-year-old Rachel and 9-month-old Lillian Entwistle, both deceased. The medical examiner was called to the scene. Autopsies later revealed that Rachel had been shot in the head, and baby Lillian had been shot in the abdomen, and the bullet had passed through her tiny body and into Rachel's chest. But where is Neil? There was no forced entry to the house, and nothing was missing. The only thing gone was the family's white BMW. Police launched a search for Neil and eventually found his car at Logan Airport. A quick check of his financial records revealed that he had fled town on January 21st, purchasing a one-way ticket back to England. When Neil arrived in the United Kingdom, he drove around aimlessly, racking up 800 miles on a rental car. He tried to withdraw money from an ATM in Manchester that night before checking into a hotel and heading to his parents' house the following morning. And that is where the cops find him when they call him on January 23rd.
Hi, is this Neil?
It is, yes.
Neil, this is Bob Manning. I'm a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police.
Hi.
How are you?
Well,
I'm calling you because we have some bad news about your wife and your daughter.
yeah.
We responded to the house, and that they're deceased.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
I did.
You did.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me for a few minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that few minutes turned into 2 whole hours as police listened to Neil's scattered version of what went down that fateful day. According to Neil, January 20th started like any other day. He says he woke up at 7 a.m. to feed Lillian and then left at 9 to buy some computer stuff. When he returned home at 11 a.m., he checked the nursery and didn't find Lillian there. So, he went to the master bedroom where he discovered his wife and daughter dead in the bed.
The covers were partially up. They were under the covers. When I walked in, I couldn't see Lily. I could only see Rachel, and she just looked asleep. Didn't look anything wrong, but why would she have been in bed at that time, and where was Lily? And then as I got closer, I could see the blood, and that's when I saw Lily's the top half of the face was out, and I pulled the covers back. And
Neil tells the police that he could tell Rachel and Lillian had been shot, which is strange because when first responders arrived, it wasn't even clear how Rachel had died until after her autopsy. The bullet wound was so small and hidden in her hairline that it wasn't immediately obvious. Neil then says that his first instinct wasn't to call for help, but to go downstairs, grab a knife, and consider ending it all right then and there.
I went downstairs and I took one of the knives out of the block of knives I had in the kitchen. Maybe I could, but I just didn't have the courage to do it.
So instead, he said he got in his car and drove to Rachel's parents' house, because he knew that Rachel's stepfather, Joseph Matarazzo, had an impressive gun collection, and he thought he could steal one of those so he could finish the job. But when he got there, the house was locked, and that plan fell apart. At this point, he says he panicked and the only thing he could think of was being back home with his parents. Not to call the police, not to call Rachel's parents and tell them what happened to their daughter and granddaughter. No, the only solution Neil could think of was to buy a plane ticket and fly to a whole other country. Police weren't buying any of Neil's story, so they started digging into his background to figure out who exactly are they dealing with. And it didn't take long before investigators uncovered some very odd things about this seemingly perfect husband and father. First, they found out he's $40,000 in credit card debt, and out of his 18 credit cards, only one was not maxed out, and that wasn't even the worst of it. Turns out, Neil Entwistle was deeply involved in online dating and escorts, and he was living an entire secret life that nobody, especially Rachel, knew about. Before they even moved to the States in the summer of 2005, Neil had created a profile on the swingers website. His profile picture was a full nude shot of himself just lounging on a chair. And when police checked his internet history, it was flooded with sites like adultfriendfinder.com, half-price escorts, escortsnaughtylife.com, and hotlocalescorts.com. But sex sites weren't the only thing Neil was searching for. The days leading up to the murders, he had been googling things like cheap flights to the UK and quick suicide methods, best way to kill someone, and knife and neck kill. He even found an online forum where someone suggested it was better to stab someone just below the ribcage instead of going for the aorta. And if all that wasn't damning enough, investigators realized Neil had mentioned his father-in-law's gun collection during their phone call.
Joe has guns in the house. I thought maybe
So, officers went straight to the Matarazzos and collected all of Joe's guns. Testing confirmed that Rachel and Lily were shot with Joe's .22 caliber revolver. DNA on the gun's grip matched Neil's DNA. Neil's explanation was that about a month before the murders, he went shooting with his father-in-law at his club, which was true. But here's the problem. Not only was Neil's DNA on the handle of the gun, which could maybe be explained if he had used it before, but Rachel's DNA was found on the front and inside of the barrel. This meant the gun was close enough to Rachel when she was shot in the head that her DNA bleed back into the gun's barrel. And just when you think it could get any more obvious, police find a set of keys to his father-in-law's house sitting in the car Neil abandoned at Logan Airport. These were the keys he would have needed to get inside when Rachel's parents weren't home to grab the gun. And remember, when Neil told the police he couldn't get inside Rachel's parents' house to shoot himself because the house was locked, well, he literally had the keys to the house in his hands, so he could have just gotten in just fine if that had really been his plan. On February 9th, Neil was arrested. When he was taken into custody, authorities found a piece of paper folded up in his pocket. There was actually a page torn out of a newspaper from the section where escorts advertised their services. A search of Neil's recent internet activity showed he had continued searching escort sites even after Rachel and Lily's deaths. He was extradited back to the United States a week later. Upon his return, Neil started changing his story completely, now claiming that when he found Rachel and Lillian, he immediately assumed it was a murder-suicide. According to his new version, he discovered his father-in-law's .22 revolver near their bodies and believed Rachel had killed Lillian before taking her own life. He even claims that instead of calling the police, he decided to put the gun back in the lockbox at the Matarazzo house in order to protect Rachel's honor, knowing that people would judge her for killing little Lily. But there was one major problem with this new story. It was physically impossible. Investigators analyzed the position of the bodies and the gun's dimensions. For Rachel to have committed this murder-suicide as Neil described, she would have to hold Lillian with her left hand, aim at her daughter's abdomen with her right hand, and fire a shot that somehow passed through the child and into herself. Then, she would have had to position the gun against her own head and pull the trigger. The scenario was completely implausible. It was in June 2008 that Neil Entwistle would stand trial for the murders of his wife and his daughter. Neil's defense didn't call a single witness, and he didn't testify on his own behalf. In the end, he was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, and the judge gave him 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. After the sentencing, his parents stood by him, insisting he was innocent. They doubled down on the claim that Rachel had killed Lillian and then herself, claiming Rachel was depressed.
We know that our son Neil is innocent, and we are devastated to learn that the evidence points to Rachel murdering our grandchild and then committing suicide. I knew Rachel was depressed. Our son will now go to jail for loving, honouring and protecting his wife's memory.
When a reporter asked if they had ever tried to help Rachel, Considering the fact that they knew about her struggles, they did not give any answer. Rachel's family, on the other hand, made it clear while the verdict brought some justice, it didn't erase the pain of losing Rachel and Lillian. Neil Entwistle really thought he could do whatever he wanted and just get away with it. But what's so strange about this case is how incredibly bad his cover-up attempt was. He did such a poor job of trying to blame his wife. Did he genuinely think investigators would buy the story that he was so distraught he never thought to tell anyone and just left the country? That finding his family murdered was somehow a reason to hop on a plane to England without calling the police or even Rachel's parents. Then there's that phone call with investigators. If you listen to the recording, it's like he couldn't have given less of a shit. His voice is flat, emotionless, discussing his wife and baby daughter's murders as casually as if he were ordering a takeout. The only thing Neil Entwistle showed any real emotion was during the trial, when crime scene videos were displayed. But there wasn't grief on display. If you watch the footage, it looks more like he is trying to hide his laughter behind his hands.